Hello, welcome to What Are You Watching? A new show here on the multi-verse Geekdom YouTube channel. I am Ben, I will be your host, and every week I will have a guest to talk about what they have been watching. And my first guest, you might know him from the Slowdown. His Slowdown name is Brother Loomis, but they're going to call him the other Ben. How you doing tonight, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk about some Dragon Ball.
Well, let's get right into it. Okay, how this show is going to work, I'm going to ask like Ken ahead of time to pick a show or movie to talk about. And tonight, we're talking Dragon Ball. So, which Dragon Ball are we talking about?
I thought since it's the one that's still going on, we'd talk about Dragon Ball Super, but I am happy to hit any of them.
Well, that's not the Dragon Ball Super. What first got you into the show? You don't mind me asking.
Oh no, so I've been watching Dragon Ball for 20 some years now. So like when I first went to college, I lived in sort of a ruralish part of Ohio, so there was no Japanese anime, none of that, and it was before the internet. So when I went to college, like people would sit around in like the freshman common area, and they were watching Dragon Ball Z, which was like coming out like at the time, and I got hooked on it. So every day, in between classes, I'd go down there and watch Dragon Ball Z with them, and I've just sort of stuck with it over time. And as Dragon Ball Super came out, it just, they've always kept the same characters and they've evolved the characters to be more comedic at times. But, I've just developed an emotional connection to them over 20 years.
Do you have like a favorite character?
I've always been partial to Krillin. He was my favorite character in Dragon Ball Z. But he doesn't really have a huge part to play in Dragon Ball Super. He's just sort of a side comic relief character. But I've really grown to love Vegeta in Dragon Ball Super because they've really focused on developing him from just like a mindless villain into a more layered character that has a family life and a comedic side.
Now, for people who might not know anything about Dragon Ball Z, can you sum up like the plot in a few sentences?
Sure. Originally, it basically revolves around an alien race called the Saiyans. So, sorry, I have to go back in time a little bit, but originally they would send out their infants to like worlds to basically kill off the population of the worlds so then they could sell the worlds to other alien races. And so there was an alien named Kakarot that was sent here as an infant, but he got a head injury. He forgot that he was supposed to kill everybody, and he grew up just sort of as a normal human life. And well, not normal human life, but normal for that universe.
Okay.
And so over time, he becomes like the greatest martial artist on Earth, and he has a series of adventures. And it's very similar to the MCU. As just if you imagine him as sort of the Captain America, he sort of tends to pull in all of these individuals with unique powers or combat abilities, and they sort of rally around him to fight off whatever alien threat starts attacking the Earth next. And it's just over the 20 years, it's just been a ever expanding, more powerful alien threat attacking to the Earth. So when they get to Dragon Ball Super, which is the current one, as opposed to alien threats, it's deities that are coming to Earth and uh, threatening the Earth, and so they have to elevate their powers to godlike powers.
Wow. And the show is still going on?
It They haven't had a new episode of the show in a couple of years now. They did just release another movie that is like a continuation of the story in the show, and I believe it's supposed to come back. It's based on a Japanese manga comic of the same name, and so usually the show will go on breaks for a year, couple of years, until like a certain run of the manga is done, and then they will sort of translate that into the animation and then release the animation.
And where do you fall in to the sub versus dub debate when it comes to anime?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Where do you fall in the sub or dub? Do you like English or do you like reading subtitles?
I'm a. I prefer the dubs just because I am lazy, but like it's hard to find without searching like a. So like the original Dragon Ball, the one that was started in the 1980s, it has a lot of adult content on it, and if you get like the dubs that were released in America, it doesn't really translate all of that, and I think it's somewhat edited. So if you
Okay.
want to see the show as it was meant to be, you have to watch the original Dragon Ball with subtitles. But I think like now, like Dragon Ball Super, it's more of it's less racy than the older episodes of like the original Dragon Ball. There's less sexual content and things like that. So I don't think you miss too much by watching those in the dubs, but that's just kind of my personal take on
Do they have a good voice cast? Do you know?
it. I don't know much about the voice cast. I've never really looked into it, to be honest.
How many there might be asking along, how many seasons is it?
Oh, that is a tough question. I don't think it's like it's released like originally in Japan before it's come over here, and they have like a different format for seasons.
Okay.
I want to say that it's like the original Dragon Ball started airing in the late 80s. So I think it's been on, with these random hiatus periods while they write the mangas since I want to say like 1988, somewhere in there.
Oh wow.
So I want to say like if you go onto like Hulu and you look at Dragon Ball Super, it's I think it's like one season, but that one season will have like 90 episodes. So
Oh
it's not really structured like your typical American weekly show. I don't know if that makes any sense.
no, it doesn't. When you say the property is more globally bigger than Pokemon.
Um, I would. Can you say it one more time? I apologize, man.
No, it is more globally popular than Pokemon.
Um, I don't know if it's more popular than Pokemon or not. Like, oh, that's a good question. I think Pokemon probably has like a wider multimedia appeal than Dragon Ball. Like, I know Dragon Ball has had some very popular games, like Z Fighters and things like that. But I think probably Pokemon, if you take everything together, like trading cards, games, toys, whatever, I think Pokemon probably has a wider following. But I think if you're just talking about like the TV and movie product, I would say Dragon Ball probably has a slight edge because like when the movies are released in theaters, you'll get like a $30 million opening weekend even in the US for a Dragon Ball movie, and I don't even think like the Ryan Reynolds one did all that well as far as Pokemon goes in that regard.
Now, you're talking about Dragon Ball stuff. I have to bring it up. Did you end up seeing the live action movie that came out a few years ago?
The live action one.
Yeah.
I watched it, and it is as bad as they say it is. It is very much not faithful to the source material, and it is very poorly done.
Mm. Okay, answer me this. Which is the better adaptation? That movie or The Last Airbender from M. Night Shyamalan?
I think The Last Airbender is the better adaptation of the two.
Wow.
Um, and I don't think it's that close, to be honest with you.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've never watched like The Legend of Korra or like any of the follow-up series, but like I watched all of The Last Airbender, and I could see the connections in the M. Night Shyamalan movie. They didn't always, you know, but like other than the characters having the same names and there being items named Dragon Balls, like it was very little connection that I could see anyway.
Do you think there is a way to make a live action adaptation and make it good?
Um, I think you will always be better served doing it as an anime.
Okay.
Um, you definitely can, but one of the things that like I've always found really weird, and I mean people would have more insight this than I would, but a lot of the a lot of the anime characters they're drawn with like Caucasian features, and it's really weird that they're drawn that way. But if you translated them that way into live action, it wouldn't seem right. I don't know if that makes any sense. And so
No,
I think there would be
I really don't say it makes sense. I don't
yeah
know why, but it makes sense for some
yeah,
reason. For some
and
reason.
you would have to yeah, and there's so much like lore, because it's been on the air for 20 years. You would have to pick like a starting point, probably with the original Dragon Balls, to make a movie out of it. And then if you did that, you would have a show about a kid in very adult situations that probably wouldn't translate all that great to live action.
Yeah. And now you bring that up, now I'm thinking about Pokemon, and the main character in Pokemon is, in the anime cartoon, it is Caucasian, but I think you're right. If they ever made that live action Pokemon from the original stuff, it would
Yeah.
feel weird for it to be a Caucasian actor.
Yeah, and I feel like that with most of the main like Dragon Ball characters is I don't know that there's a way to translate them to film where it's not disrespectful. And maybe Pokemon is like that as well. I don't know. But I don't know. That's always what I've thought is that you would always be better served just keeping it as an anime.
Uh, Talking about anime, have you ever watched Yu-Gi-Oh?
I have not. Like, what's really weird is that even though like I really like Dragon Ball and My Hero Academia and the original Last Airbender, I'm not super well versed in like other anime. I think probably the only other anime series that I ever watched a fair amount of was a show called Inuyasha.
What is that one about?
It is a it's about a girl who falls down a well and ends up in a parallel dimension full of demons, and she awakens this half demon, and then they go on adventures trying to find these pieces of a magical amulet. But it's been so long, I don't even remember why they wanted the magical amulet at this point.
it sounds interesting. It
Yeah,
sounds like an interesting anime.
it was. This was. I was probably in my 20s when I was watching it, so the years have fogged it to a certain extent.
Uh, Anime is so interesting to me because, for disclosure, I'm not big on anime, but I've seen some movies.
Hmm.
I mostly seen the um hang on, I've seen the what is it called? The Kawasaki movies. The
Which one?
Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli.
I'm sorry,
Have you
man.
seen it? Studio Ghibli. Have you ever seen any of those Studio Ghibli movies?
No, I don't think so.
They are pretty good. But yeah, I'm not big on anime either. Kind of what to me, but it's so overwhelming to, like you said, to find a starting point. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, if you were talking about like Dragon Ball, you can jump in with Dragon Ball Z and not lose too much and eventually pick everything up. And with My Hero, I think you need to start with the beginning. But like as far as like the other anime universe, man, it's like so dense. I have a kid and he's obsessed with YouTube, so he watches all these like summary shows of all the animes. So he can go rattle off like all the characters in 10,000 different animes I've never heard of that he's never even watched. So I guess maybe watching the YouTube summaries is a place to get your foot in the door.
Hey, you know what? That's not a bad idea. What other? Probably like a half hour each
Yeah,
summary?
yeah, that's the ones that he does. Like they'll just go through all the characters and like their little history, and they'll be like 15 minutes to 30 minutes, and it gets you kind of caught up so you can jump in. I know, like he's watched those for like Naruto and Demon Slayer and a few others, and he seems well versed in them, even though I know he's never watched them.
No, I hear good things about Demon Slayer. Have you ever seen that?
I have not. Like I have heard my nephew and my son have both encouraged me to watch it, but I've not quite made it yet. I can't
Yeah.
convince myself to pay that $6 a month for Crunchyroll to watch it.
Oh. Well, isn't it part of HBO Max right now?
Oh, it is?
I think it is. Like, if you have HBO Max, you should have Crunchyroll.
Oh, whoa. Well, then I
I
will.
might be wrong. I might be wrong, but I think so.
I'll give that a gander after we're off because I have HBO Max. I don't use it a ton, but I will check it if I get the free Crunchyroll.
Yeah, you have to go like really down in the menu to find all the categories it has. And I'm
Yeah,
pretty
like the hub,
sure. I'm sorry.
the hubs.
Yeah, the hubs. You're right. And I'm pretty sure Crunchyroll is one of them.
Cool. Well, thank you for that, man.
Oh, you learn something new every day, my man. You learn something new every day.
It's very
So,
true.
you have like a favorite snowy arc or a favorite snowy line from Dragon Ball? And you
Uh,
want to talk about?
yeah, there are two. One of them is from Dragon Ball Z, actually, and it is the Frieza storyline. That's the most iconic story arc of like the whole series. And I would say like most people that are Dragon Ball fans, like that's the fight, the battle, the story arc you know that solidified it, that carved out a place in their heart was the Frieza storyline. um so not to spoil it, but essentially there's this being who seems to be all powerful, and that's a repeating theme. And he so Goku has to level up to become this mythical Super Saiyan in order to battle him. But I don't remember how many episodes was, but like when you were watching, when the show was coming out weekly, like this one battle, it took like 2 months just for the fight to unfold on TV. It felt like,
Oh
and
wow.
and one thing I will always give Dragon Ball like immense credit for is like a lot of their fight scenes are just close-ups of their characters' faces yelling, and you still get an emotional attachment, and are engrossed in the fight. Even though all it is just random close-ups of people going ah. But I would say the Frieza arc is really what hooked me in the show. But as far as Dragon Ball Super is like the Tournament of Power arc, and that's like the most recent sort of arc that they've had that's been released. But it's basically these two they're demigods. They get in an argument over which they each rule like a different dimension, and they get in an argument over which dimension has the greatest warriors. And so the the actual god of the show is called Zinni. So he decides that he is going to have a tournament of all of the dimensions. So each dimension will put together a team of its greatest warriors, and they will battle in this one great tournament. And then the dimension that loses will get wiped off the face of existence. And he'll start back over with just the strongest dimension. So like there's literally like all of reality is hanging on this great battle royal between the dimensions. So like as these fighters are losing, you're seeing like entire galaxies wiped off the map as they lose, and so it's just kind of riveting, like they ramp the stakes up. One thing I think Dragon Ball does like better than any sort of legacy series, better than Star Wars, any of them that have been around for a long time, is that they managed to ramp up the stakes without losing who their characters are. And yet they're always bringing in new characters. Like every season, there are new characters that stay with you and that go forward and that still play a role. And I think almost more so than any long running series, I think that they do an amazing job at that.
Well, that's really interesting. Well, now, if somebody wanted to go watch this, where can you find them?
Dragon Ball Z. Oh, sorry, Dragon Ball Z. You either have to have Funimation, which I know is getting closed down, or Crunchyroll. The original Dragon Ball you can find on Hulu. That's
Okay.
dubbed, but it's not dubbed; it's subtitled. And then Dragon Ball Super is also on Hulu right now, the dubbed version.
Okay. And um, so do you think uh, do you think these are going to come back anytime soon? What do you?
Do you say that again?
I'm sorry. Do you think they're going to come back with new episodes like
I
within the
be,
year?
I believe they will. I think when the current manga arc is completed, I think they will ultimately like animate that. There's usually a couple like years in between, and then in between they'll release like movies to sort of like fill in the gaps during the time. So I don't know if you remember. I want to say it was in August. There was a Dragon Ball Super movie that was released in theaters in the U.S., which was sort of like a next sort of storyline in Dragon Ball Super. So I think usually when you start seeing the movies come out, eventually, not too long after that, within a year or so, you start getting more episodes. Now, I do not know if it'll be called Dragon Ball Z when it comes. I mean, Dragon Ball Super when it comes back, because a lot of times, like even though the stories are continuous, like Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, it's all one continuous story with the same characters. Just progressing, through time. So it may be called like Dragon Ball A23.2 or something like that, but it will still be the same continuation of the story arc, I would think.
Huh. Do you, I remember that something. In the, so, I remember that movie coming out. It did well. It did better than most people thought it would, right? In
Yeah,
the
it
box
was number
office.
one. Yeah, it was number one at the box office. It had like a really steep box office like drop off the second week, but I want to say that both of the Dragon Ball Super movies that have come out, there was one, I want to say 2020 or 2021, like shortly after the pandemic ended, there was Dragon Ball Super Broly, and then there was just another Dragon Ball Super movie called Dragon Ball Super Heroes. Both of them, I think, were number one at the box office the week they came out. And so they tend to bottom off on that. Like all the Dragon Ball fans tend to go out, see them that weekend, and then that is that. But yeah, I mean, they have traditionally done really well, especially for like what they cost to make. They definitely make money on them.
Well, I also remember, I think it was in 2020, maybe in 2021, Demon Slayer movie. That did well too. So there is an appetite for these anime movies, right?
Yeah, yeah, there definitely is. I think even like the My Hero Academia had a movie come out in the last year, and it did well as well. I think there's a very dedicated fan base. I think there's a cap on, I don't think it's ever going to put together like $1 billion film or anything like that. But I think that the fan base is very loyal to the shows, and it's like me. I'm not even like an anime guy, but I have followed this show for 20 years. And so I think it's like the people that connect to an anime show, they tend to be very loyal to it, and they tend to go out and support it when it comes into the theater. And so I think they'll always do well as long as they're producing new content.
Do you think over the next few years we can get more of these anime movies performing well?
Can you say it again?
Do you think over the next few years they'll continue to bring more movies and put them in theaters?
I think they will continue to put more movies in theaters. Like, I think the Dragon Ball ones, especially, are doing like consistently better. Like, Dragon Ball has actually released a trillion movies over the years, and most of them are just sort of like forgotten in time somewhere on DVDs or
Right.
streaming services or like that. But recently they've done increasingly better. I think it's just because it's become such a legacy show. Like there are now like multiple generations of Dragon Ball fans that it's they're making it more of an event instead of like releasing them all the time. It's kind of like the reverse of what the Lego movies did,
Right.
where they had the event movie and then they put 50,000 of them on streaming services, and like then the audience checked out. So Dragon Ball used to have like 50,000 movies out, and now they're putting out like one every 2 years. And so the people just have an appetite to go consume that one when it comes out.
Well, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not super familiar. Dragon Ball seems like something the whole family could go to, right?
Yeah, it is now. Like Dragon Ball, like Super, like of the movies they've had for Dragon Ball Super and the show itself. I think you're fine taking. Every family is different, but I think anyone like that can sit still in a theater for an hour and a half is fine going and watching those movies. From like 6 to age 90. Now, if you were going back and watching like the original Dragon Ball series, that you may want to wait until your kid is 12, 13, because there's a lot of innuendo and things like that, and some straight up sexual content in those shows. But like
Oh.
the modern Dragon Ball show is very family friendly.
Now, if they came to you and they asked, we want you in it, but we want you in it in a satisfying way. Do you have any like ideal way you want to end Dragon Ball that you wouldn't be annoyed with?
Um, See, I think eventually, trying to think I think eventually it will end up. You can only have more powerful villains for so long, and they have been ramping up the power of their villains since the 1980s. And literally, at this point, they are fighting with demigods. So I feel like the next logical step is they'll be fighting with gods, and then you'll have to get really creative for there to be a step beyond that.
Well, it's kind of like the MCU. The MCU started with Tony and Jeff Bridges fighting. And over time, in 2019, we have the entire MCU fighting Thanos in Endgame. So they're basically doing the same thing, right?
Yeah. They're like I said, I think it's very similar to the MCU. Like if you think of like Goku as Captain America, and they're always escalating villains. So, and it's the MCU. I think is going to run in the same thing. Like now, as you see, like them involving like a Hercules and other demigods, is that eventually the Avengers will rise to meet that threat, and then the threat of the Celestials. But then eventually, just like in the comic books, you get to a point where there are no more mountains to climb, and then you have to reset it and start from the beginning unless you find someone that is far more creative than I. So I guess if I was picking one way for it to end is so there are these paired gods in each dimension, the Kais and the Destroyers, in Dragon Ball. And I think ultimately it makes sense for Goku and Vegeta to get so powerful that they fulfill those roles in their dimension. One is
Mhm.
the Kai, the good one, and one is the Destroyer, the one that brings chaos. And I think that's for me, that's where I would ultimately have it end, or for it to reboot, and then them sort of being the deities that sort of shepherd in the next reboot. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I would end it. But I am very curious to see where it goes over time.
Do you, do you think they will end it? I mean, or do you think they're going to keep it going for a while?
I don't know. They it makes a lot of money between the manga and the shows and the movies, and it is just getting to that cultural sweet spot where like everything that they're producing is making money. So I don't foresee them like stopping unless like the creator of the guy that writes all the comics, I can't pronounce his name. I want to say it's Toriyama, but I'm butchering his name. Uh, Unless he just wants to slam on the brakes and say it's done, like that could happen. But even then, I think there's so much money involved in it now. You would have like a Disney or George Lucas situation where there's going to be someone that wants to keep churning out this content for
Right.
the foreseeable future.
And we see how that is turning out with Lucasfilm.
The say one more time.
I said we're seeing how that is turning out with
Yeah,
Disney having
yeah,
Star Wars.
that has not been the windfall that we all hoped for. At least not for me. Like I like a lot of the Star Wars content, but it is like after the Force Awakens, like the potential that I thought it had, like after that and the aftermath books and the early on content from the new unified Star Wars universe, uh, it has not lived up to that early potential. But I still like a lot of the content.
Uh, on a similar topic, real quick, are you watching Andor? What are you thinking of Andor?
I have only watched the first episode,
Mhm.
and while I was watching it, there were two kids screaming in the room, so I only heard every third word. So I am going to revisit and watch Andor. So I said I'm just getting back into the television swing of
But
things. So I just finished She-Hulk, so I
what do
just
you
got caught up with
what do you think of She-Hulk?
that. I thought the first two episodes were flaming garbage. And then after
Okay.
that, I thought it was a really fun show, and I ended up really enjoying it a lot. And then the finale was very anticlimactic and just
Yeah, it's an interesting show. It seems like you're either I wouldn't. Yeah, it's very divisive. I'm getting a lot of the MCU since Endgame has been very divisive. Have you seen that yourself?
sorry. Can you say it again?
Ever since Endgame,
Hmm?
the MCU has been divisive. Do
Yeah,
you think?
I agree with you. Like it seemed very it seemed very purposeful, even when it wasn't great all the way up until Endgame. And ever since Endgame, it feels a lot like the DC movies feel now, where they are released. They're just sort of floating out there, not connected to anything. Some of them are fun, some of them are not, but there's doesn't seem like they're intentional. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. So maybe that'll change. I don't know. It,
Knowing who Kevin Feige is, or guessing who Kevin Feige is, I think he has a plan, and I think we're going to see it unfold.
I don't know. I'm kind of getting the feeling like we saw his plan and his plan ended and then it made $1 trillion and they wanted him to keep going and he's like, we already did my plan.
Oh wow! Oh, wow! I guess that's possible. I'm
So
even curious how they're going to bring in the X-Men.
I are you frozen?
No,
Oh,
are
sorry.
you?
Yeah, no, you were like a ninja there. You were like completely still. It's like so still. So I thought you were frozen.
They're coming in Japan.
No, I'm fascinated to how they're going to bring like the X-Men in. And to be honest, like I know that they have like this sort of like plan and they're wanting to do that later than sooner. But if it was me, man, I would move the X-Men up and I'm a big believer in giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of characters in the X-Men that can be like a grounding force for the MCU itself to revolve around. Like Professor X or whoever, like there can be that central guy that people will accept as the central guy. Now that Iron Man and Captain America are gone, maybe
Well,
Sam Wilson's Iron Man can be that guy. I don't know. I mean,
well,
Captain America.
well. Technically speaking, the first X-Men movie we are getting
Mhm.
is Deadpool.
Uh, so I don't think that that's going to be like super connected.
No, probably not. But yeah, I I don't know. I didn't know I wanted to see it. It was in that announcement video.
Yeah, I am very curious to see how much Hugh Jackman is actually going to be in that movie.
Oh, you don't think that much?
I hope he's in the whole thing, but I get like the feeling that it's like a troll move. Like he's only going to be
Oh,
in it for like 3 minutes.
if that happened, you know how many people would be pissed off?
They will, but they will have done paid to see it.
You know what? You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Look what happened with X-Force in Deadpool 2.
Uh, and I kind of get the feeling that that's what they're doing again. Although I would love, I don't know if you have you ever seen an old comedy called Half Baked with Dave Chappelle.
No, it's on my list. I have to see it.
So there's a character in Half Baked that's played by Stephen Wright, who's one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time, just called the guy on the couch. And he really doesn't have any lines or anything other than like one line in the whole movie. And he's just like sleeping in this dude's apartment on his couch, and no one really knows who he is or why he's there, but he's just the guy on the couch. And I would really like to see the old Fox Wolverine just be that in the MCU. Just like Hugh Jackman is just like sleeping on Doctor Strange's couch and no one knows why he's there. But that's just
That
me.
that would be funny. That would be funny. Um. All right, Amy, not to wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to talk about Dragon Ball real quick?
No, I encourage like everyone to, if you know, if you've not checked it out, like I would start with Dragon Ball Z and go through from Z to now. Like there's a ton of content and it's well done. And especially like if you like, the sort of the ebb and flow of like modern superhero movies, like there's a lot of that those same arcs, that same dynamic in there. And it just really grabs you, man. And so I encourage everyone to check it out. And there's a bunch of weirdos out there with backpacks that'll talk to you about it if you're having a bad day. But that's kind of
Well,
like my summary of the whole thing.
well, I will definitely look it up. You got me interested in it. I'll go on to look up Dragon Ball, see what I find. Hopefully
Oh, I
I
hope you
find.
enjoy it, man.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Before we wrap up, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you?
I am generally in Southern Ohio, so if you're lurking around Southern Ohio, I'm there. I'm on Twitter. I had to change my name to Crush the Plums because Brother Lomas is dead, but you can find me on Twitter at Crush the Plums. And other than that, I have no media or internet presence. So you either can try to find me in Southern Ohio or on Twitter at Crush the Plums.
You're a good follow. I like what you put.
Thank you. Most people don't, it doesn't make any sense. But if you like weirdness and extra weirdness and violent weirdness, I am the follow for you.
And he's good at it. Believe me, he's good at it. And you guys can find me at my Twitter, red_radio. Yeah, and I'm all over this channel. We have shows pretty much every day now. Thank you so much for coming to this premiere episode, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.